We're going to talk today about paragraph structure using this TIEALAC formula. Now, there's no set formula for paragraphs, but you can have a paragraph that's 2 pages long or a single sentence. But for the purposes of new writers, it can be useful to learn a structure or a possible structure for a paragraph. It helps you organize your ideas and make sure your ideas are focused and so that your readers can follow you. I still use this structure that was taught to me by a student when I'm writing articles for newspapers and other less creative types of essays. So here's the structure, TIEALAC. T stands for topic sentence. I and E means introduce evidence. A is analyze evidence. L, link to new piece of evidence. A, analyze that evidence. And you usually do that in relationship with the last piece of evidence. And then C stands for closing the paragraph. And if you can, find a unique way to connect it to the next paragraph and idea. Really, your sentences should be creating relationships between ideas. Now, the topic sentence is the first sentence. For argumentative papers, like we're writing in this class, they should be making a claim. They shouldn't be informational. So everything in that paragraph should support that claim that you're making, and that claim should connect back to the thesis statement. The topic sentence acts as a guide for the readers. It tells them what to expect in the rest of the paragraph. The same way the thesis acts as a guide for the readers to tell them what you're going to do in the essay as a whole. Introducing evidence. So the next few sentences after the topic sentence will introduce your first piece of evidence that supports the claim you're making. Depending on the type of strategy you're using in terms of argument, it may be that you are giving an author some ethos or to show us that they're an expert. You may be vividly describing a scene that's going to appeal to our emotion of fear or compassion. You might be using some logos, so introducing some statistics and where you got them from to show us that it's reliable. You don't just want to drop a quote in as evidence without introducing it. You want to create a context for your evidence. And then you're going to analyze the evidence. As we've talked about, and that we'll talk about some more, analysis should be the bulk of your essays. It shouldn't just be cutting and pasting other people's ideas. The most important thing is what you say about those ideas. Analysis is the meat of your essays and thus your paragraphs. In your steps of analysis, you want to explain what it is about that piece of evidence that supports your claim and thus your thesis statement. Sometimes newer writers don't realize that the connections they make in their head aren't immediately obvious to everybody else. And I like to say that actually newer writers don't realize that their ideas are as unique as they are. So you need to explain all the steps of how your claim, how your evidence is supported, supports your claim, how you make that connection. So link is the idea of then synthesizing two different pieces of evidence from two different sources to support your claim. That way it's not just a summary of different research, but you're actually doing this creative project, which is you're taking different pieces of evidence and putting them together to support a claim. And there's always a little bit of language that you can use there, a connecting words such as like however or in addition to, or Edwards is not the only one who supports gun regulations, but and then you tell somebody, another expert that talks about gun regulations or whatever your essay is focused on. And then you again introduce that evidence again, like we did in the last one. So you want to practice these ideas of synthesis where you're seamlessly bringing together pieces of evidence. Now, even though the suggestion is every paragraph has two pieces of evidence, you don't want to just force another piece of evidence in there thinking I need two pieces of evidence in every paragraph and then just cut and paste something randomly. It really needs to be something that logically supports that claim you're making. So please don't try to force a second piece of evidence into a paragraph. If you have one perfect piece of evidence to support a claim, then just stick with that and move on. Make sure you use appropriate evidence for each claim. And then you're going to analyze that again. So really try to imagine when you're doing analysis that you live in a particular reality in your head, and you need to get some distance on your readers and the assumptions you make about what everybody agrees with or the way that they think. Your background makes you think in a unique way, and other people's background makes them think in unique ways. So you're trying to greet your reader as somebody that you're trying to get them to see things your way. And that can be very aggressive. As you know, some people can be very aggressive about trying to get people to see things their way. But as we talked about, you could just bring that person over to your side of the argument or your side of your view of a landscape. Like maybe someone has their back to the sunset and you're just trying to get them to turn around and see the sunset, or in this case, your point of view on the issue. And then you're going to close and connect. Now, the best paragraphs find a smooth way to connect between the idea in one paragraph with the idea in the next. If you can't find a way to create a relationship between the two paragraphs, they might not be in the best order. Sometimes it can be very difficult to figure out which order to put your ideas in. And what I used to do when we used to put in essays on paper and do a lot more printing was have people cut the paragraphs up, like actually print the paper up and cut it up, and then try to piece it together like a puzzle. So if you feel like that might, like some tactile interaction with your paper might be useful, or you're getting stuck in a certain order, then maybe just try that. Just try a different way of connecting different pieces of evidence. You could even cut different pieces of evidence from different paragraphs, put your claims and different evidence, and then try to find an order where you can find a relationship between two ideas. So this is the TIEALAC formula. Again, there's no rules or formulas in writing that you have to stick to. It's just a suggestion if you're struggling with ways to focus your paragraphs, if that's feedback that you've gotten consistently from me, that you get consistently from me in this class, or you've gotten consistently from other teachers, that your ideas are jumbled, they're not focused, or you're organized haphazardly, then the TIEALAC formula can be for you. And it could just also be a good way to check in to make sure you're doing all the steps, that you have claims you're making, you have enough evidence, and you have enough analysis. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions about it, send me an email or let's have a conference. I look forward to reading your paragraphs.